Some debts are paid in blood, others are paid in silence. The worst ones, the kind that hollow you out, are paid in both. Sloane had learned that before she ever set foot in a room with real monsters. She'd learned it sitting at a kitchen table in Sudbury, watching her stepmother count out cash she didn't have, making promises to men who didn't deal in promises. But that was later. That came after the other thing. The thing Sloane still didn't have a clean word for. Her father died on a Wednesday in November, which felt like something he would have planned. Alistair Beaumont had always had a flair for inconvenience. He chose bad timing the way other men chose bad ties, reflexively, without thought, and always at someone else's expense. He'd been sick for 18 months, and in those 18 months he'd done 3 things. Sold the house Sloane grew up in, married a woman named Daphne Crow, and neglected to update his will. By Thursday morning, Sloane knew the house was gone. By Friday, she knew the savings account was empty. By Saturday, she was standing in the living room of her childhood home, now Daphne's home, being told, very politely, that her things had been boxed and left on the porch. "We need the space," Daphne said. She was arranging flowers, white roses. She didn't look up. "You understand." Sloane did not understand, but she took her boxes and she left. She was 26 years old. She had a finance degree she hadn't used in 2 years, and she had $412 in her checking account. She knew this because she'd checked 3 times that morning, as though the number might change. It didn't. She moved into a room above a laundromat in Sudbury, paid weekly, cash only. The landlord's name was Benny, and he had a dog that barked at 3 in the morning and never, in Sloane experience. She found work at a bookkeeping firm downtown, not because she particularly liked the work, but because she was good at it, but because she didn't lie. Numbers didn't tell you the house was still yours, and then hand you a box of your mother's dishes and look away. She kept her head down. She built a routine. She told herself this was temporary. For 18 months, she believed it. It was Daphne who dismantled that particular fiction. Sloane had not spoken to her stepmother since the morning with the boxes. Daphne had made her position clear with the efficiency of someone accustomed to clearing away inconveniences, and Sloane had filed her away in the part of her mind labeled things that are over. So when Daphne's name appeared on her phone on a Tuesday evening in March, Sloane stared at it, long enough that the call went to voicemail. She did not call back. The second call came 20 minutes later, then a third. She answered the 4th one. "I'm in trouble," Daphne said without preamble. No hello, no acknowledgement that they hadn't spoken in a year and a half. Just, "I'm in trouble," like Sloane was someone who owed her a response. "Call someone who cares," Sloane said. "I owe money." A pause. Sloane set down her mug. "To a bank?" Silence. "Daphne, to a bank?" "No." The word came out small, smaller than Sloane had ever heard from her. Not a bank. She should have hung up. She knows that now. Looking back, she can mark that moment. The pause after "not a bank" as the precise point where her life split into before and after, and she chose after when she should have said goodbye. "How much?" Sloane asked instead. The number Daphne said made the room feel smaller. Sloane drove to Daphne's house, her father's house, the house with the white roses, on a Thursday. She told herself she was going to assess the situation. Get facts, the same way she approached an untidy ledger. No emotion, just information. What she found was worse than untidy. Daphne, it turned out, had been borrowing money for 3 years. Not from banks, not from friends. From a man named Croft, just Croft. No first name anyone offered, who ran a quiet and very efficient private lending operation out of an office building in downtown Toronto. The kind of operation that didn't advertise, didn't extend to strangers, and didn't forgive late payments. Daphne had been introduced through a friend of a friend. The original loan was reasonable. The interest was not. The subsequent loans, taken to cover the interest on the first, were catastrophic. It kept growing, Daphne said. She was sitting at the kitchen table, which was where Sloane had always imagined she'd be in a moment like this. "Every time I thought I'd caught up, you took another loan." "I needed to. You took another loan," Sloane said again. Not a question this time. Daphne was quiet. The number she'd given on the phone was the principal. There was also interest. Compounded. Sloane did the math in her head in about 30 seconds and felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What did Croft say?" she asked. "When you missed the last payment?" Daphne's hands were flat on the table. She wasn't looking at Sloane. "Daphne," he said. She stopped, started again. He said there were other ways to settle, that he knew someone who needed certain kinds of skills. Administrative skills. Someone organized, he said. Someone good with numbers who could be trusted to be discreet. Sloane went very still. "What kind of someone?" "He gave me a name." Daphne finally looked up. Her eyes were dry, which told Sloane everything. "He said if I could provide the right person, the debt would be cleared." The right person. Sloane looked at her stepmother. She looked at the white roses on the counter, a fresh arrangement, because Daphne had apparently still found time to buy flowers, even while drowning in six-figure debt to a criminal lender. She looked at the kitchen table where, 18 months ago, she'd been told her boxes were on the porch. "Whose name?" she said. Daphne slid a card across the table. Plain white. One name in embossed black letters. Harrow. She could have walked out. She has replayed this part more times than she can count, turning it over the way you turn a stone looking for what's underneath. She could have stood up, taken her coat off the chair, walked to her car, driven back to her room above the laundromat, and let Daphne sort out her own catastrophe. She did not do that. She told herself it was the math, that it was simply a calculation. Do this thing, clear the debt. Daphne is no longer in danger, and Sloane owes nothing more to anyone. Clean ledger, final balance. That is what she told herself. She called the number on the card. The man who answered had a voice like gravel on glass. He asked 2 questions, her name, and whether she could start Monday. She said yes to both before she'd finished deciding to. "Someone will be in touch about the address," he said. "Come alone. Don't be late." He hung up before she could ask what she'd actually agreed to. The address turned out to be a building in the financial district. Glass and steel, nothing like what she'd imagined. She'd imagined something with a back entrance, something that looked like what it was. This building had a lobby with marble floors and a security desk and an elevator that required a keycard she was handed without comment by a man in a dark suit who looked through her rather than at her. The elevator went up, further up than she expected. The office at the top was quiet, not the quiet of an empty space. The quiet of a space where noise had simply been decided against. Floor-to-ceiling windows. City below. 2 chairs facing a desk. No one was sitting at the desk. She stood for what felt like a long time. Then a door behind her opened and Harrow walked in. She recognized him from nothing. There was no photograph on the card, no online presence she'd been able to find. In the 4 days between the phone call and this moment, she'd looked. She'd looked the way she used to dig through spreadsheets methodically, turning over every corner. Nothing. He existed the way certain debts exist. You know the weight of them before you understand the source. He was taller than she'd expected, for no reason she could name. Late 30s, maybe 40, built like someone who had once been in a physical profession and had never entirely left it. A scar along the left side of his jaw, pale and old. Dark suit, no tie. He moved through the room without looking at the view, without acknowledging the desk or the chairs, without looking at her for the first few seconds. When he did look at her, it was the way you look at a column of numbers before deciding whether they're worth your time. "Beaumont," he said. "Yes, you called 3 days ago." "Not Monday." She'd called Saturday. "You said Monday was the start." "I called to get more information. I didn't answer, no. But the call told me the number was active and the voicemail was full, which means you're either too busy to manage inbound communication or you don't trust whoever handles it. Either way, that's relevant." He looked at her for a moment longer than felt comfortable. "Sit down," he said. His name was Everett Harrow, though no one used the first name in her presence and she didn't try it. He ran what she came to understand, over days and then weeks, as the kind of operation that existed in the gap between legal and something else. Contracts, logistics, money moved through structures that looked clean from the outside and were meticulously clean on the inside, which was not the same thing as being clean. She was hired to handle the books. That was the simple version. The longer version was that the books had not been in good shape when she arrived. Not corrupt. Harrow was not careless. She learned that immediately. But disorganized in the way that happens when an operation grows faster than its infrastructure. Accounts that should have been consolidated were separate. Redundant entries everywhere. 3 different contractors doing overlapping work because no one had mapped the overlap. She mapped the overlap. She did it in the first week without being asked, presenting a summary on Friday in the same plain style she used for everything else. Here is what I found. Here is what it costs you. Here is what I'd do about it. She slid it across his desk with both hands, which was not something she did because she was nervous, but because the desk was wide, and she didn't want to have to watch him reach for it. He read it without expression. "Where did you find the redundancy in the container accounts?" he asked. She explained. He asked another question. She answered it. He asked a third, and she pulled out the supporting sheet she'd brought because she'd anticipated the third question. He was quiet for a moment. "Who taught you how to read accounts this way?" he said. "No one. I just..." She stopped, tried again. "I see the shape of it. Like a table that's been built wrong. You can see where the leg should be before you know why it's wobbling." Something shifted in his face. Not much. Barely a fraction. "Come back Monday," he said. "We'll talk about the container accounts." That was not what he'd said the previous Monday, or the Monday before. He'd said, "We'll see how the week goes." He'd said it like someone who expected not to be surprised. She came back Monday. She did not call Daphne. Daphne called her once in the 3rd week. Sloane let it ring. She was in the middle of reconciling a discrepancy in a shipping manifest. Not her job, technically, but it was there, and it was wrong, and wrong things bothered her in a way she'd never been able to explain or justify, and by the time she remembered the call, it was late, and she decided she'd deal with it tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week. Next week became the month. She told herself she'd handle it once she understood what she was handling. What she was handling, she came to understand, was this: Harrow ran a syndicate. Not a romantic word. Not a word from films. In practice, it meant he controlled a network of interconnected interests. Some of them legal, some of them not, all of them profitable, and all of them dependent on the kind of precise, continuous financial management that his previous people had not provided. She was providing it. In return, she was paid extremely well. She had a key card and an office 2 floors below his. She had access to records that would have put most of the people she'd grown up around in a great deal of difficulty, and she was trusted with those records the way you trust a tool. Because it works, because you've tested it, because replacing it would be expensive. She was under no illusions about what this was. She also could not find a reason to leave. Not the money. The money was real, but the money wasn't the thing. The thing was closer to this. For the first time in 2 years, she was in a room where the numbers told the truth. The accounts were real accounts. The problems were real problems. No one handed her a box of her mother's dishes and told her she understood. She found she needed that more than she'd known she was missing it. She found the error in the offshore structure on a Tuesday in June. Not an error she'd made, an error that predated her. Someone, some years back, had set up a series of accounts through 3 different jurisdictions in a way that was meant to be airtight, and was, instead, bleeding. Not dramatically. The kind of bleeding you didn't notice month to month. You only saw it if you looked at the 5-year picture and knew what healthy looked like by comparison. Sloane looked at it for a long time before she did anything. Then she walked upstairs. Harrow was on the phone. He held up one finger without looking at her, which she had learned meant wait, not leave, and she waited by the window while he finished. Below, the city moved. She had stopped thinking of it as a view and started thinking of it as a fact. The city was below. The accounts were what they were, and she was here. He hung up. "Offshore," she said. She set the folder on the desk. Accounts established in 2019. Whoever structured this used 3 holding companies, which was smart, but they ran them through the same administrator in 2 of the 3 jurisdictions, which means a single point of exposure. If that administrator is ever audited or pressured, then 2/3 of the structure becomes visible, 2/3 of the structure becomes legible, she said, to anyone who knows what to look for. He opened the folder. He read. She watched him read the way she watched accounts, not nervously, just waiting to see what came up. How long have you known about this? He said. I found it this morning. He looked up. I came up as soon as I finished verifying it, she said. I don't present problems I haven't confirmed. He studied her. The look that had once felt like being evaluated by something measuring her weight had changed. Over months into something. She couldn't have said exactly what. Something more like the way you look at an account that keeps coming out right, not surprised, but paying attention. Can you fix it? He said. Not alone. You'd need a lawyer in the Cayman jurisdiction and a compliance specialist in Luxembourg, but I can build the restructure framework. She paused. I already started. She put a second folder on the desk. He was quiet for a moment. What do you want? He said. The question caught her off guard, which not many things did anymore. What? You've been here 5 months. You found a structural problem that's been invisible for 4 years. You walked up here immediately, and you already have a solution framework. He closed the first folder. In my experience, people who do that want something. She thought about the laundromat room. She thought about $412 and Benny's dog and the box of her mother's dishes. I want the offshore structure fixed, she said, because if it goes wrong, it takes everything else with it, including my work, which I'd prefer not to see collapse because of something someone else built badly. A pause. That's it, he said. That's it. He looked at her for another moment, then he opened the second folder. Walk me through it, he said, in August. Croft reached out, not to Sloane, to Harrow, through channels she wasn't supposed to know about, and found out about anyway because she was, at this point, the person who handled the accounts that those channels ran through. Croft was one of a dozen smaller operators who existed in relationship to Harrow's Syndicate, not employed by it, not independent of it. Orbiting. The message was simple. Croft was calling in a favor. He had a woman who owed him money. She'd settled the debt by providing the name of a useful person. Croft wanted acknowledgement that the arrangement was complete. Sloane read the message summary in a document she had technical access to and probably wasn't meant to be reading. She sat with it for a day. Then she requested a meeting. Harrow was on time, as he always was. He had the file open when she came in. Not the message. Something else. Something about a shipping contract. And he looked up and set it aside in the way he'd started to set things aside when she came in, which was not something she'd noticed she was noticing until she'd already noticed it. I need to tell you something, she said. She told him everything. Daphne, the debt, the card with his name, the phone call, the calculation she'd made, and whether it was really just a calculation. She was precise. She did not apologize, and she did not editorialize. She laid it out like an account. Here is the structure. Here is what was owed. Here is what was exchanged. When she finished, the room was quiet. You've known about the Croft message, he said. It wasn't a question. Since yesterday, and you came to me. I wasn't going to not tell you. He was watching her with that look again, the one she couldn't find a clean category for. Do you know what most people do? He said. When they find out they're in a position of having deceived me, even passively, they manage the information, she said. They decide what I don't need to know, and they build a story around the gap. Yes, I'm not good at that, she said. I notice gaps, they bother me. Something crossed his pretty. The scar on his jaw caught the light from the window. What do you want me to do about Croft, he said. Nothing, she said immediately. The debt is cleared, he said himself. I don't want anything from him, and I don't need anything from him. She stopped. You just what? I wanted it on the record, she said, between us, because I'm in your books and your accounts and your offshore structure, and you should know the full account. The city moved below the window. A long moment passed. The Cayman restructure is going through next week, he said. It was not an answer to anything she'd said. I know, she said. You'll be managing the transition documents. Yes, I'm going to need you here for that. She understood after a moment that this was the answer. Not to the question she'd asked, to the question she'd done. I know, she said again. She picked up her folders and went back downstairs. Daphne called in September. Sloane answered this time. "Is it done?" Daphne asked. "Not how are you? Not I've been worried. Just, is it done? The debt to Croft?" Sloane said. "Yes, months ago." "Good." A breath. "I knew you'd manage it." Sloane stood at the window of her office, not the small one she'd started in, a larger one now, because she'd needed more wall space for the filing system she'd built and no one had objected when she moved, and looked at the city. "Don't call me again," she said. Silence. "Sloane, you traded me," she said. "I understand why. I even understand the math. But you traded me, and it worked out, and now the account is closed. Don't call me again." She hung up. She stood at the window for a while after that. Not upset exactly. Something more like the feeling you get when a long-running column finally balances. Not happiness, just the absence of a particular kind of weight. The restructure was completed in October. It was clean, it was airtight, and it had taken 11 weeks of work that Sloane had driven like something personal. Harrow reviewed it with 2 lawyers and his compliance specialist in Luxembourg and came back with no changes. He told her this in the same way he told her most things, directly, without decoration. "It's good work," he said. "Thank you," she said. A pause. "Stay," he said. The word landed differently than it usually did. Slower. Not the restructure. Just stay. She looked at him. He looked at her. Outside, November had started the way it always started in Toronto. Grey and inevitable, pressing down on the city like a hand. "That's not a business conversation," she said. "No," he said. "It's not." She thought about a lot of things in the moment that followed. She thought about the room above the laundromat, and Benny's dog, and $412. She thought about a card with a name on it, and a choice she'd made in a kitchen that smelled like someone else's roses. She thought about what it felt like to be in a room where the numbers told the truth. "I'm not good at things that aren't in the ledger," she said. "I know," he said. "Neither am I." She looked at him for a long moment. "I'll think about it," she said. She went back downstairs. She did not, as it turned out, think about it very long. Later, much later, when people asked, which they sometimes did, because the story had a way of getting out in the particular circles where these things circulate. Sloane never described it as a rescue. She had not been rescued. She had walked into a room with clear eyes and made a series of decisions, each one following from the last, the way good accounts work. One entry leads to the next, and if you've done it right, the final balance makes sense. Daphne's debt was someone else's problem now. Croft had his acknowledgement and his closed file. The offshore structure held. The Syndicate's books were, for the first time in years, something you could hand to someone intelligent and not feel embarrassed about. And Sloane was still there, not because she'd been traded into it, not because she had nowhere else to go. She had options now. She'd made sure of that. Because she was not the kind of person who let herself not have options, but because she'd looked at the ledger, and the ledger made sense. That was all it had ever taken, really. She'd just needed to find a room where the numbers were real.